Is Joe Mixon an elite dynasty running back? Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I am your host, Chad Parsons, joined by Jordan McNamara. And Jordan laughs because this was not on the show sheet. We don't have a show sheet. But I started thinking about it. Joe Mixon is a very, unlike people that want to bury Jonathan Taylor this week, which is apparently a vogue thing to do. But Joe Mixon coming off a monster game. I haven't checked. I believe it's his career game. 42 PPR points has to be close to that. And he had put up 3 straight relative stinkers to break out expectations. And why are we saying breakout after, I mean, again, he's had a running back 1 level year. We've talked, I don't know if we've talked on this show, Jordan, but we've talked about Joe Mixon plenty over the past 12 to 18 months. So this is 1 week, but now you have a lot more options than you had 48, 72 hours ago in terms of maybe feeling better about your lineup with Joe Mixon, but also in the trade market with so many running back moving pieces, there are pivot opportunities galore. So where do you stand on the spectrum?
I think it's notable, we track start rate, 95% week 1, 93% week 2, 86% week 3, and 81% week 4, where his breakout is. I know he was on my bench.
So less people than ever got credit for that week, is what you're saying. Some people got absolutely screwed with him on your bench.
Yeah, which is just, I mean, I had him on my bench in a spot, and I had other good options. It wasn't like I was benching him for someone bad. I think it was like him or Mike Davis, and it was like a pretty clear indication that I had to be Mike Davis, right?
Who was running back 7 on the week. It's not like he's chopped potatoes.
Right. It wasn't like I totally fanned on it. I wasn't going way down the line, but yeah, I mean, so from a positive perspective, right? I think he's a good player. We like the profile. It's always been a question to me of the upside, right? And I joked that that him and Nick Chubb were basically the same player. People thought that Joe Mixon was this huge receiving threat, when in actuality they were essentially the same player on a receiving basis last year. And I think Chubb's a better runner, so it was an interesting debate there. This is an interesting one. Do you use this opportunity to sort of bridge a gap, right? Do you go from him to Jacobs? Do you go from him to Jonathan Taylor? Right now, I think we've gotten some bounce back, or I think people were after 8, 12, and 8 as his fantasy points the last 3 weeks. Now he drops to 42. He's up to running back 7. So if people are just season long stat gazers in terms of the how's the guy doing, right? He's going to appear pretty high, whereas he wasn't last week. So it's I think an interesting opportunity to sort of bridge a gap. I had tried him to Barkley, and that didn't work. I wonder if that avenue opens up a little bit more, because you're getting guys more where they're going to need the help if they're still competitive right now. Those things, oh, hey, I'm a contender. And you can sort of give them that opportunity. I think that's an upgrade long term. I don't think he's the player that we thought he was coming into the NFL. Or put another way, I think we had higher visions of what his upside presented in terms of from a receiving perspective. And when you look at his profile, to date, there really hasn't been the receiving volume and productivity that we would have expected, and he hasn't been that effective. So that's really been a concern for him, I think, in terms of the overall profile. And that's something that coming into the NFL, I thought he was going to be better in that aspect than he has been.
Yeah, let me ask you one thing on the receiving part. Do you think, and this could be a David Montgomery type question, in that he could be on a depth chart where you say, well, Giovanni Bernard is better in that regard. So it may not be an ultimatum or referendum on Joe Mixon cannot do this, or we will not ask him to do this. It's we have a secondary guy, and that's more of his forte, or he is better, like Tariq Cohen to David Montgomery, and saying, why would we, use our snaps with Mixon as more of a receiver type when that's what we will be asking Giovanni Bernard to do, and just sort of blending of like, how do you actually make a game plan or, create these puzzle pieces together on a weekly basis for overarching running back opportunities.
Well, I think that's a fair thought. The flip side of that, though, is that Mixon's run 95 routes to only 61 for Giovanni Bernard. So hasn't been maybe it has capped the upside, right? Maybe if Giovanni Bernard wasn't there, he would be running 115, 120, 125.
Ideally, you want the 2-minute drills, you want the hurry up, and Gio's in there, and I mean, some of the critical zones where you could really have big upside, and we talk about true workhorse roles. That's what Mixon is lacking.
Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, he's taken 60 or so % of the receiving work, right? So out of that backfield. So so I mean, I sort of thought that until I dove into the numbers a little bit. He's still seeing plenty of opportunities. He just hasn't been effective, right? I mean, that's ultimately, whether that's his fault, whether that's, there's some grading services that say it's him. We could sort of debate that. But it's been a pretty consistent trend that he is underwhelmed from what we expected as a receiver. So I think that's definitely a concern. If this sort of masquerades that issue, and this presents an exit point where you can trade him at basically a running back 6 or 7 type valuation, I think that's a pretty good opportunity, whether that's to pivot up or whether that's to pivot down to somebody else and get something added on, right? You trade Mixon for DeAndre Swift plus, for example, something like that. I think this presents those interesting opportunities. He's a guy that you can pivot a bunch of different ways.
I just thought of one, because my first question to you after that was going to be, it sounds like there's 4, 5, 6 guys you would take straight up to Joe Mixon, and this might be the week you can get that done. Just to summarize something that you parsed in there, correct?
Yeah, I think this is a good action week on him. Yes.
And then here's the other thing I just thought of. So I've said before, the two-way go of, can you get something that replicates now or gets you close or even has the possibility to surpass current year or a smaller prism? And then can you get something else that is going to benefit you even if you're wrong later? So you could win it twice. You could win it even if you miss now and you're dead wrong. You still have an opportunity to even the deal or etc. in the future. What do you think about this? So let's bridge together the Nick Chubb injury. What do you think about what type of pluses you could get with Joe Mixon for Kareem Hunt plus? Do you think Kareem Hunt over this spectrum without Nick Chubb outscores Joe Mixon? Like, what if you're making the Vegas line? Who would you put as the favorite there?
Well, I think we have to watch for what Hunt's injury status is. He himself, I think, was banged up in that game, so I haven't seen practice reports because it's still early in the week. So I'd watch.
Let's
for
assume
that.
He's healthy.
Let's assume he's healthy. I think it's pretty close, and honestly, I think it wouldn't be. I don't think it would be unreasonable to say you would have Hunt over Mixon in a 6-game sample or something like that.
Right. Because I would imagine you can get way more than Hunt in a first for Mixon. Just guessing. With the ambiguity of Hunt's overall situation, and will he be the true lead back beyond what we are now? But receiving centric guy, I thought he's put up some good tape since he's been back. And anyway, one thing I wanted to mention, because I've kind of realized it's taken me a couple of years to actually refine what I think Joe Mixon's limitation is. One of his limitations is that it takes him so I have to say, I don't, watching Game Pass, I don't, on the condensed version, I don't get a lot of the commentary, but I heard this commentary part on his touchdown run. I guess one of his touchdown runs. So it was from distance, which is a strange thing to say with Joe Mixon because he normally doesn't score from distance. So they said, and no one's going to catch Joe Mixon as he goes to the end zone. First of all, I think a lot of people catch Joe Mixon, and they almost caught him on that one. So I thought that was funny. But he really, number one, the reason you don't see a lot of 10 plus, 15 yard plus runs is because it takes him a while to go from first gear to third gear. He's a bigger back, but he really doesn't have, like, Taylor gets up to speed in an instant. Like, you'll see him turn a 3-yard run into a 10-yard run. Why? Because he just out angles people with his speed. That's the complete opposite of Mixon, who's more of a grinder. Even Fournette, I would say has more 1 to 10 yard burst than Mixon as a bigger back profile. And so that's part of it. So he doesn't really get open field opportunities as much because he just doesn't get there. Like, the holes close, the defenders chase and close angles. And then the other part is, I really don't think, he has a 3.5 kind of gear. So he's more of that grinder profile that the big plays will elude him. He needs volume. He needs touchdowns. He needs a lot of receptions. Like, I just don't think Nick Chubb is the opposite. He's a big guy that you see that all the time, right? You see when he gets the edge, the big things are happening. When he gets a path, it's a touchdown. It's not 23 yards. So I do want to notate that that's one of the big differences I've seen and finally been able to kind of put into action with an analysis here that I think he's missing. And it's not David Montgomery-like, but it's in that vein of there is some limitation there in terms of actually getting away from guys. And I think that's one of the biggest things. I looked up, and fantasy regular season last year, his biggest game was 17 points. 17 last year. And yet he was still valued highly in the offseason. I know we talked about that. But so Mixon, I think, like you said, an action week is very appropriate. This is the week that, man, I'm trying to think, if you're a contender, I still think there's contender moves to make. Like, I don't think you should feel in a box saying, man, I got to hold Mixon because he's going to get X number of carries or touches per week, and I can't possibly lose that in my lineup, because there's a lot of ways to get something plus. And you're really, let's be fair. You mentioned DeAndre Swift. I mentioned Kareem Hunt. What's the upside for J.K. Dobbins if Mark Ingram goes down? So to pretend like you're making moves, let's say, or, Miles Sanders plus, or getting Nick Chubb, big picture. Talk about a talent upgrade in my view. But there's so many pivot possibilities to get something, or maybe add a small piece on your end, that you still may not be losing much in the short term if he's, if his typical game is 10 to 18 points. I don't think, and going back to AWARP, and you can give people a definition, I don't think you're going to lose as much impact as you might think.
Yeah, especially if he's going to be in that 10 to 18 range. That's fine, but that's not league changing, right? That's just not.
That won't be why you win or lose.
Right. And the difference between 10 and 18 points, if you average it out over the course of a regular season, is a win, right? That's a win. So you think of things in that range.
Assuming he's scoring 18 and assuming the guy you're replacing him with is 10.
Right. Yeah. If he were to just score 10 points, if he were to average 10 points a game over the course of the regular season, and you compare him to, or if he were to average 18, right, that average is a win difference. So, so that's a good, but, let's keep that in perspective. It's not, the term league winner gets kicked around so frequently. I think it's widely misunderstood.
You mean it's overrated, just like when people say that what their title chances are?
Yeah. Just kind of like the boom bust narrative, right? Some of these things just get kicked around a little bit. And
have you put a trolling Twitter poll out on what does league winner mean to you, and put like numbers to it and just see what people say?
Yeah, I actually put something out on Twitter about what the loss of Barkley was to folks, and there was a lot of people that were like, "Oh, it's 3+ wins," and in reality, it's probably somewhere right around, maybe, in a good season, it was 2. Right, in a top 5 season, it was probably 2 wins, and he honestly wasn't trending that way. So, so it's interesting to see those things. I got myself in enough trouble with apparently trolling tweets this week on don't step into Philadelphia Eagles Twitter, is what I've learned. This week.
Don't do it. Did you denounce Hakeem Butler? Is that what happened?
I had a very definitive take about Carson Wentz.
That's like Groundhog Day. Watch out for the first step. It's a doozy.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So you, Carson Wentz, ruffling feathers. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. The funny part about it is I was watching the game, and I actually talked about it in our staff group chat, which is you watch what Aaron Rodgers is doing with this offense, and I mean, yeah, his offensive line is better.
Robert
But
Tonyan led offense.
Robert Tonyan, I mean, undrafted guys all around, and honestly, like their most dynamic threat is Aaron Jones out of the backfield, and from an Aaron Jones perspective, I've always been a little bit quizzical. I found it really interesting that he's one of the most targeted down the field running backs, right? His ADOT, or his average depth of target, is really high for a running back. So they scheme him up in ways that are pretty interesting. All of that said, there's no day two pedigree of note, and like Jamal Williams is their second best receiving threat last night, and everyone thinks he sucks, right? Like I like Jamal Williams, you like Jamal Williams, but the narrative out there is, oh, he's not any good. Then you flip it over
still ahead of AJ Dillon.
Yeah,
I mean, this is looking pretty good. I mean, saying you're behind Aaron Jones is, doesn't mean you're not NFL baseline or better, and you're ahead right now of their second round pick.
Absolutely. And so then you flip it over to Philadelphia, and it's just really interesting because, I mean, the only team that has a Pro Bowler that was running out there this week was the Eagles with Zach Ertz. And
now, how many steps does that guy look like he lost? Just to that guy cannot get away, and
he wants to get paid too.
This is brutal. It is kind of brutal to watch him. I mean, he looks like Jason Witten out there. And I will notate, not impending doom or anything, but this is an environment where tight ends, the non all timers, 29, 30, 31, 32. This is sort of the range where a lot of them do start to fall off. And not wheels fall off. It doesn't mean you can't still be a fantasy starter or whatever, but just assuming a guy puts up some top 5 seasons, and that means they will make it till 32, 33 unscathed. Just putting that out there. It's no guarantee when you start looking at age curves, especially with higher impact production.
Yeah, for sure. And so I just the Wentz thing, just the comparison between the two, it's just interesting. One of the big criticisms was, Wentz's offensive line. Wentz has actually used more time to throw this year than Rodgers has.
And when you circling, trying not to take sack, like when he circles, and then Brian Hoyer style, just like takes the sack. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Can I give a shout out to, I'm sure we haven't talked, but one of our favorites this year so far. I mean, this is close to a Latavius Murray-like situation. Mr. Mike Davis. How about a guy that no one wanted anything to be with, in late August, when we had clarity about this backfield. And what I think it's behind. The better the running back you're behind as the injury away guy, and especially if you're not like Alexander Madison or Jamal Williams wasn't out on waiver wires in August or early September, but when you get a like Saquon Barkley, right? I mean, everybody maybe Wayne Gallman was owned, but Deion Lewis was out there, presumed to be the backup for a wild stretch, and then we have Mike Davis behind Christian McCaffrey. He is, looking on a per game basis, he has more impact right now in AWARP than Joe Mixon, who just came off 40 points. He's had 2 games, and basically he's been a strong impact player for you both games. He's 2 for 2, and it's not going away. Every game McCaffrey misses, and I don't know about you, Jordan. I mean, to think that McCaffrey, the first game he's supposed to come back with a high ankle with his, sort of what his game is, this is not a guarantee that McCaffrey comes back and all of a sudden Davis barely plays. I think there's a non-zero chance that we're seeing more starts than people are thinking right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the timeline is, if they've committed more to anything specific.
Week 6 is like the first chance, so we're getting at least one more, but then beyond that, I haven't checked when their bye week is. Maybe that, if it ends up being week 7, I mean, maybe that it shifts their decision or whatever, but yeah, high ankles are tricky. are very tricky, and I think they're even trickier probably for guys that are used to being elusive in space and highly mobile.
Yeah, and Mike Davis he hasn't forced them into a situation where they need to rush McCaffrey back. Not that they don't want McCaffrey back, but I mean, he's played fine that you could say, hey, let's wait until you're full, right? Let's wait until you're full practice. And we've seen with this high ankle being limiting guys like Kamara and Barkley the past couple of years, they get back and they're not fully back, right? So maybe and I think both of those situations were rushed.
Well, what did we say about Kamara? At least I did last year, which is, man, what happened? The guy can't break a tackle. The guy can't get away from anybody. Can you imagine if McCaffrey's out there and that's the state of affairs? I mean, with Mike Davis playing how he is, if that's the moment of the switch back to McCaffrey, that's going to be an interesting, how do they deploy snaps and touches in that scenario? Because Kamara was catching the ball well, but that's basically it. His hands. He wasn't getting away from anybody.
Yeah. How's third most receptions for a running back feel for
absolutely
for Mike
peppered.
Davis? I
think the Football Guys projection was 17, 18 points the first week, and then it was like 20 last week.
Yeah.
Good luck getting that guy out of your lineup.
Yeah, and you get Atlanta this week. Like this could be just.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Reggie Bonifon just went to the practice squad / he's got a high ankle himself. This is good. This could be the week for Mike Davis. This could be the week he puts up 30 plus. Like the first two were just little teases. Right. This could be the week for him.
Yeah,
Atlanta. Oh my gosh.
And we've seen what running backs have done to them. Right?
Is Atlanta the worst defense
recently as last night? I don't know. Dallas is pretty bad.
That is true. Dallas versus Atlanta. They might just have no clock. First one to 80. We'll just call this thing.
Yeah. So I think Mike Davis, it really, really high impact, and
again, just enjoy it while you got it. Right. I mean, I don't imagine someone's going to give you more than a second round pick, right?
No, I don't think so.
I have a hard time thinking that. And yet, if he gets 2-3 more starts under his belt, you're talking about potentially like half a win.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. So, I mean, what does your table say about, a later second round pick, assuming contender versus getting a half a win just right now? I mean,
take the half a win.
Yeah.
And he doesn't go away, right? I mean, he's still going to be a one injury away.
He's still injury away.
Right.
And he's a former 4th round pick that had a pretty good profile, almost or all the way fell out of the NFL before resurfacing. But he has a profile. He was a good recruit. Just fell through the floor, and now you got all the way to off the waiver wire for free in August, a la Malcolm Brown. So that's where we stand. I wanted to ask: you mentioned the action plan with Joe Mixon. Is there a running back or overall player this week that you say, this is going to be a week of high action, that I'm either a seller, I'm either a buyer, but there's something to exploit here?
I think DJ Moore is pretty undervalued. I think the idea that DJ Moore, when you break it down and look at him on an efficiency basis, right, he's up in terms of air yards. He's up in terms of depth of target, in terms of yards per reception, in terms of all the other stuff. Yes, Robbie Anderson has been good. It hasn't really taken a chunk out of DJ Moore. DJ Moore averaged 9 targets last year. He's at 8 this year, right? And he missed a game last year. He finished with $135 in targets. He's on pace for 128 this year. So there isn't a problem there. The problem is he hasn't scored yet. Right. And so when
he's been a low touchdown guy in his career so far, but that typically, other than Julio, Julio popped off. I mean, they typically come around is the thing. And I was going to say no tight end presence. So to say that they can't support multiple top 24 receivers or whatever strata you want to put Robbie Anderson in, again, the tight end presence, Ian Thomas, I mean, talk about turning into a figment of our imagination.
He's cuttable in like...
Yeah. 1 tight end leagues for sure. I mean, even if it's 1.5, I mean, I don't know how you hold him just based on he's a pot hands. Like he just can't, he fights the ball every time. It's painful to watch.
Yeah.
Jugs. It's called the Jugs machine. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
he's being relegated by Manhurts. I mean,
Manhurts is running routes, and that should tell you
yes.
he was a blocking only guy there with Greg Olson, and now they're like, Manhurts, we got to get you out of here. We got to get you out here running routes because our man Thomas isn't doing it. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I know you love to block, but we need you to run a nice saucy route or two because he catches the ball. Yeah, I think DJ Moore is a really good one, especially when you look at his profile, his pedigree, and then what he's done so far to this season. And you just want to keep doubling down and buying in off of that. I wanted to ask you and resurface a conversation, and your answer may not change. But what do you think about the career start, the career game that we saw last week to date for Antonio Gibson, and the things you were saying about if you get X level of pick, that might have been in play, but maybe not in previous weeks. It seems like there's a growing sentiment that now is going to be responsive in the trade market if you are looking to sell and maybe lock in picks or profiles that are more sturdy long term.
Yeah, I think certainly the market's going to be on this. I don't know if I've told you this story yet, but I made a trade offer to somebody. It was actually him and Hayden Hurst for what I thought was going to be a relatively high first round pick in maybe the first week of September. And I think it was about the first week of September. And someone responded with, who the F, they used the full word, is Antonio Gibson. And I was like, oh.
Did MFL flag him and ban him from their team? Kidding.
It's
responses are off the chain over there sometimes.
I'm like,
no asterisks used.
Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't know, right? So again, people didn't know who Antonio Gibson is, and now you got more than that and a counter offer from them. That'd be a great end of the story.
I'm just waiting. He took great offense to my trade offer, which in hindsight I'm really glad that he didn't hit accept.
Are you going to send Antonio Gibson for their best player and say, "Do you know who Antonio Gibson is now?"
I should. I definitely should do that. I'm sure that person is regretting it.
Well, I think you said, so please correct me, but I think on the show you said something of the ilk that, and this was a week or two ago, maybe, 2 or 3 weeks ago, was that historically speaking, you should take any future first round pick or something like that, right? For Antonio Gibson, or was it a high first? What was the actual prism we said?
I said I would take a first plus. I think that's the right. And by that plus, we mean I would have taken a one injury away backup guy, right? A Latavius Murray, something like that.
Okay. Has your opinion changed at
Davis.
all, or do you still stand by that? Is that still your advice for an action plan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of on the. We've seen it a little bit, right? I think it's positive so far. I'm trying to gauge where he would be. Well, he's at running back 16 right now. Let's just assume that's where he finishes the year, right? What does that put him in next year? I think that probably puts him in the top. And if you're ranking running backs, I would say that's probably top
25,
15.
Oh, okay. Oh, because if it's just 20 pedigree, what he did year one. Well, that would just be what a massive, because that's basically what Josh Jacobs did a year ago, right? He was in that running back 15, 16 sort of zone, right? And the thing you said was, well, he was round one. Yep. Which is obviously different than Antonio Gibson, but their rookie season per game might be similar there.
Yeah, I think he ended up finishing 22 because he missed a couple of games, but yeah, it's something in that range.
Okay.
I would feel. I mean, is he going to go? If he continues on this track, is he going to be more expensive than DeAndre Swift? Is he going to be more expensive than J.K. Dobbins?
Well, right? if Cyborg Adrian Peterson has anything to say, it will be different.
Right. So that's that is interesting to me, honestly, in terms of going from him to.
You might be able to get Swift plus now.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Is can you go from Antonio Gibson to one of the guys that was a lot higher up in the draft that we like as better profiles,
Akers,
and
Swift, plus. Dobbins.
Yes,
those are the three that I think are possibilities with Gibson. So now you're essentially getting an early first, a top 5 pick.
In a really good class. And next year, I don't think that class is going to sniff.
Right. Yeah. Well, guys,
outside of Superflex.
Let's be frank. All these running backs had enough profile to say they could be 101, 102, 103 in classes. And yet some of them were going 4, 5, 6 or 7. Right. Well, here's the other thing. You have to Here's the interesting part for folks that might be considering, oh, let me get out or sell or on, say, J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Swift. Those would be the two I would focus on. Is how do you feel differently if Adrian Peterson and or Mark Ingram get injured soon? How much do you think their opportunity spectrum changes based on that one thing occurring? Because like Nick Chubb, like some of these others, they can remain locked until one thing happens and it's later in the season and they are unlocked. So those are still potential league altering players in a best case scenario this year. Just because you haven't really felt comfortable with anything more than a dart throw flex, that's okay. But Swift has a good. We're talking about guys a month into their career with not a regular offseason. I mean, I am really just one point here that I'm just really impressed with the overall rookie impact and contribution, snap wise, opportunity wise, and I think that just speaks to the strength of the class overall. I mean, you're seeing CeeDee Lamb right now. I mean, do you break ties in his direction for a wide receiver 3 in your lineup? Probably. I mean, this is a month in. I mean, and it's a team with Amari Cooper playing well on it. So I just am really impressed overall, even by second round, some rookie picks that we're already talking about lineup decisions, and it's barely turning over to October.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good rookie performance so far in a year we didn't really expect that. I mean, Justin Jefferson. I mean, I think you really have to think about him in a different spectrum. We haven't gotten to see Rager in any.
He'd probably be on that spectrum right now if he weren't hurt. I mean, he had a couple of opportunities. He got hurt right away, but he had that one game where he could have had 2 long bombs, including a touchdown.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a good one as well of thinking, out of sight, out of mind. He'll be back later, but all signs were pointing in that direction. And Cam Akers, I still go back. The game he got hurt was the game they were rolling him out like the clear-cut starter to begin that game. I do think it maybe is a little ambiguous there, but I think it's not so much about Brown. It's, if Henderson still appears to kind of be even or behind Brown, that's really good news in the short term for Cam Akers, in my opinion. Because I think you have to be a little more worried about him than Brown.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let me ask you this. If you had to, it's sort of a big picture process point. We're through 4 weeks, right? So we're through a quarter of the fantasy season. How do you sort of treat your rookie board from May, or if you had August rookie drafts, that board versus now, right? Is there any significant changes you're making? I guess we'll call it the top 12 picks, or, of Superflex, I guess those 4 receivers in terms of Judy, Lamb, Rager, and Jefferson, and then the 3 quarterbacks, and then those the big 5 running backs there. How do you sort of feel? Would you make any big shifts in terms of where players are? Is it too early, or have you seen big enough sample or impressive enough small samples to really make changes?
So a couple things, a lot to unpack, but I'll bullet point a couple things. The first thing would be, I still stand by that Edwards-Helaire is, in my opinion, the 5th of those running backs that I would want, big picture. He's lauded on broadcasts. I hear it all the time when he does anything, and then for 10 touches in a row, he'll do almost nothing. And I keep thinking, one of these other running backs, what would they do in that same situation? And I keep thinking it's more. He popped off. He's getting volume, but to me, it's all situation infused, and it's on a team like you said. They've been, $250 million into the passing game, and we think that they're going to centerpiece, Edwards-Helaire in critical moments or whatever. So I still stand by that. That I would have, and I did take any of the other running backs over him, and obviously he's producing, he's lineup relevant right now. I get all that, but I just think let's fast forward 2, 3, 4 years. And, I think the answer is going to be another direction. In terms of the big 3 wide receivers, big 4, if you want to put Justin Jefferson in there, I think, so I still like Rager a ton. I would say one thing that I underrated, well, the Dallas defense would be a part of that as well. but for Lamb, so he's played the slot a lot. I believe from watching these games that Lamb has had a lot of easy yards. He's getting lost, and so that's aided him. Like Michael Gallup's yards are more difficult. Why? He's running the deeper routes. They're more contested plays, and honestly, he's fallen behind fantasy production wise. So I think that's one thing. Just the sheer level, the combo of Dak Prescott, not really the defense being horrible, but that's a factor to huge volume of, for the people that were taking Lamb at 4, 5, 6, or taking him at wide receiver 1 a lot more consistently, I want to say in August. And just the longer rookie drafts went on, Lamb was consistently going more often as wide receiver 1. And I really get that, the whole round 1 pedigree and good player. And then you put him in a, that pairing much better quarterback situation. Now we'll see next year. Maybe, Jerry Jeudy gets a little bump and upgrade here. But, so I think Lamb over Jeudy and or Reagor was something that I didn't pull the trigger on unless I had 2 picks, and I would take Lamb and Reagor per se. But that's one thing I think that would be adjusted a little bit. I still think fading the quarterbacks. I think Burrow looks promising, but I still think you take all of those guys over a quarterback in Superflex. That's just my take on it, even though I'm pretty sure by January Burrow goes pretty high. Yeah, I'm just looking at my board here. I mean, I think those are probably the 2 biggest things, or 3 things, I guess, that either, I would adjust a little bit or kind of stay fervent on how I had it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm going to study this because I'm fascinated by it, and I think it's a mistake that we're making, and I'll be interested. And just because we've seen the productivity of Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen later on in their rookie classes, I'm tending to think that third, fourth quarterback, especially if they're a top 10 guy and there's a gap there, right, where there was Burrow and Tua, they were in a whole different strata from where Herbert was. I mean, Herbert, it hasn't been perfect, but he looks legit through.
Very impressive,
through this.
And he's not even really running.
Right. And bad situation to throw someone into, right? Like, hey,
can't wait till they go back to Tyrod.
I wrote in my rankings update on him, and you can check it out on the site. I just wrote he's earned the chance to be the long-term starter right now, outside of a horrible coaching decision, right? I mean, that's there's this talk, and you just whatever. So all of that is to say, I think that when there's a big gap that opens up there, and I was actually able to exploit it in a couple of startup drafts where there was like a 4 or 5 round gap between Tua and Herbert, right? It was easier to do that in startup drafts because I didn't have to pass on Reagor or whoever to take a quarterback. But I was able to get in a startup draft that spread was really big. I think that's something I'm really going to pay attention to in future classes, because I'm studying it right now. I think that our ability to predict the quarterbacks, the difference between the quarterbacks of those top 10 guys, I don't think it's as good as we are. Yeah, exactly. And you just go back to that class, right? That Darnold, Mayfield, Jackson, Rosen, Allen class, and that's
what is it? The third
wrong.
Quarterback off the board, I think, and the 5th or 6th were the ones that so far, have spiked the most.
Yeah, and I think Jackson was 5th, and then Rosen was it went Mayfield, Darnold, who's been probably the worst of the guys that have played. Rosen hasn't played, but he was the 4th off the board, and then you had Allen, right, as 3, and then a huge weight into Lamar Jackson. So it's really and Lamar Jackson and Allen were the lowest thought of in rookie drafts, especially in Superflex ones. So I mean, it's interesting. I think our ability to get it right in the NFL we've seen there's a big miss rate. So when you sort of get that discount, I think it's a situation where you can take the discount. I mean, I think that's proven in the past couple of years, at least, to be a pretty profitable strategy.
Yeah, if memory serves, I don't have my table up, but I mean, 101 is marginally better than the rest of the top half of round 1. in terms of just hit rate. Maybe the hits are probably higher, but the point is that, that gap, like you're mentioning, and the other part is, we talked about with Josh Allen, and Herbert was the same way. We talked about in a start one. I mean, you can get Herbert. I have a lot more shares in one quarterbacks just because he was falling to 306, 311.
Right.
I mean, crazy stuff like Josh Allen. And it's like, well, I don't need a quarterback, but you just take one. You just take one there because you're drafting like late day 2 wide receivers. You're drafting, mid day 3 running backs or something. Sometimes as a comparative point. But yeah, I think getting high pedigree for discounted prices is probably the biggest theme there, right? Of, hey, you can hate Van Jefferson, but hey, how about if they fall to an egregious level, I'll just take them. And I did that in a couple spots because just like Justin Herbert, you go, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. I maybe don't get it. He's not one of my guys, but you hand him to me and I'll take him. As opposed to, my favorite day 3 wide receiver, I'll take Van Jefferson. And that probably in 24 months looks like a better decision more times than not. Let's rapid fire a little bit because I think the trade market's important. Let's do some comments here on some trades this week in terms of how things look. Looking at here, this is Mark Andrews and a first for Jonathan Taylor and a second. That's where we are. Jordan.
Wow, is that start one? Is that stock PPR?
It's a non-PPR, which actually doesn't even help.
Yeah, we'll just smash on Taylor there.
Again, Taylor, did you happen to check out Matt Waldman does the it's like 10 big things, or it's the 10 big takeaways. I'm butchering the title, but it comes out like every Monday. It comes out early in the week on our Football Guys cycle here. And he did a giant feature on Jonathan Taylor and basically the hand wringing. People, I don't know if it's just the box score scouting or what, but I thought he played a pretty nice game this week. And because it was single digits, first of all, let's laud Edwards-Helaire for putting up 12, and then let's banish Taylor for putting up like 8.5 or 9. So that to me is the whole like throwing grains of salt at people. Like it's just like look at this battle. I'm hitting you with all these grains of salt. But he really breaks down a great. In terms of what he's seeing, what he's doing, what his weaknesses are, and how they're correctable, how he's actually showing a lot of positive things, even if not every week you're going to put up 20 points. Let's just ask a bunch of running backs that the down games happen to almost everybody. But yeah, I think that's again, Taylor's a good one to explore the market this week. All right, you want a true, is this really happening? What month is this? Is this in season? And talk about out of sight, out of mind, and the wrong process completely. Myles Gaskin for AJ Brown. What would you add to Myles Gaskin to get AJ Brown? Let's make it more realistic here. Would you give a late first and Myles Gaskin for AJ Brown?
Yes.
All right. Well, there you go. I'm just pointing out how you can chase running back in season. All right. All right. So that's one. And let's see. Oh, DJ Moore's value right now. So that was actually a question on the, again, official in-season Dynasty trades over at Football Guys forums. I highly recommend it. We pull some trades from there for our show and everything. But what do you think about DJ Moore? What would be let's try to get a discount, but be realistic, and what type of offers would you be sending out for him?
Well, could you get DJ Moore plus for Mixon right now?
I would think so.
Yeah,
pretty easily.
I mean, that's
okay.
That's something I would explore. I mean, that's an example of something I would explore. Can you just the guys that you talked about? Can you go Gaskin plus for DJ Moore? Right? Can you sort of capitalize on that? I mean, I think it's coming for DJ Moore, and I think it's important about DJ Moore to keep in mind that the difference between wide receiver, 20 and 10. Isn't a huge deal in terms of your outcome over the course of a season. But if you can plug DJ Moore in and say, all right, I think feel really confident that he's going to land in that range, and just plug him in and play him every week he's healthy, right? That's a really good outcome. And with a player like him, with his profile, that's something that I think we can do for years going forward. And so with all of that said, I mean, if he's going to be a 120 target guy, I'm fine. Like just that you take that. And yes, there's going to be weekly variance. Yes, there is with everyone, except for someone like, I don't know, Amari Cooper, who last year was boom bust, right? I mean, that's the narrative on these guys. I just think you fade all that narrative stuff. You just take those targets on that profile, and he's a buy.
Yeah. One other guy that I think this could be an exploratory week, but maybe it could get even better. What do you think about Joshua Kelly? He was traded here for a second and a third, which you probably drafted him late second or somewhere in the third round.
That seems light.
Is that kicking the can?
Light.
I mean, I wouldn't sell him for less than a first, to be honest, because I think he could pop.
Yeah, I think so too. I wouldn't sell for less than a first. I don't think he's that. You draft him there for this scenario, right? Don't kick the can, right? Because you have it now, right? You drafted him.
Don't let Justin Jackson scare you.
Right.
Mr. 6th round undersized guy. I wouldn't let that move you off of a guy early day 3 that had some prototypical traits going on. I don't know if this is super flex, but it looks like it's not. This was Cortland Sutton and Justin Herbert for DJ Moore. So there you go. Food for thought. All right.
Yeah.
Final thoughts, Jordan, in terms of, I mean, we could have talked about 30 more players this week. This felt like a chaotic week, but now we're a month in and things be a change in for folks in terms of in-season versus off-season valuations.
It's just explore the market. We're only, if you're to think about this in a college setting, we're through our freshman year of a college career, right? That's where we are in terms of through week 4, going through the entire fantasy season. So yes, there's a lot of data here. Yes, there is a lot of standings with your team that when you sort of compare this to the end of the season, this actually explains a lot of what we know in terms of where you rank in terms of points at this point. To where you will finish in standings at the end of the year. It does explain a lot of the variance, right? These first 4 weeks do that. But keep in mind that a lot of things change, right? And it isn't entirely predictive, and there's a lot of variance in those numbers. So I would say be very attentive right now to where you stand, where you rank in terms of points. And then now is the time, if you say, listen, I don't think it's going to happen this year. We do have a lot of data, and if you're at the bottom of points, the odds that you get into the playoffs and do damage is pretty low. And you have some of these guys like Davis and some of the guys that we've mentioned. Right, now's the time, and Myles Gaskin. Right, now's the time to trade off of them, get better profiles. I'm not saying tank this year, but like now's the time you can cash those things in. And if you were not competitive, really turn the corner. And in terms of get better long-term fantasy dynasty players and profiles on your team.
Yeah, just to give a shout out to some of the things that I think would really help folks. If you've listened to this podcast for now 20 plus episodes, maybe you listen to the Audible and other shows as well, but you haven't, you're part of the Football Guys daily email as well. You can sign up for that at footballguys.com/free. You get your news on a daily basis, almost every day of the year. There's a little bit of a dark period in the off season, but you know what? Everyone needs a break, and frankly, not a lot going on. But now there's a ton going on. So every single day you get your sort of update, your fail safe, make sure you don't miss something. But again, if you're in a few leagues, and most dynasty leaguers are, that again, the My Football Guys feature, it's your companion. You can have it right there with the 5-second primer, the Dominator is what it's called. But you can have it right next to you when you're setting your waivers. It's going to save you a ton of time. It can also recommend trades for you. But the stuff from Gene Bramall, that he does the injury rounds 2-3 times a week with updates, much needed going through practice report, expectations. It's become one of my must reads every single week. Of course, you get David Dodds and other parts of the staff doing projections, which are very good. But the injury information, if you're in IDP leagues, it's a huge time saver in terms of helping you out on a side of the ball that you're probably not sitting there on Sunday, Monday, watching that, super intently when you're watching games. So you need a little help. And that's exactly what I lean on for my IDP leagues is all the great content, projecting ahead, as well as projections on a weekly basis. This is Chad Parsons, joined by Jordan McNamara, episode 23 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. In this episode, we talked about some of the divisive players for our Dynasty leagues after a month in the season. A lot more to come. We talked about the importance of the running back position. Also, we talked about the trade market, which you should really, at this point, whether you're trending towards a contender, trending towards a team looking ahead to 2021, or maybe you're in the middle and just looking to optimize player value, this is something you should be looking at every single week. Have a list of players, 3 players, 5 players that either you own them or you don't, but you're interested in what the market is. We gave a little bit of that indication, but you really have to get out there because every single league is unique and you don't know unless you ask. I am Chad Parsons. He's Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.